The pagan festival of Carnival has its roots in ancient idolatrous celebrations, many of which were dedicated to Baal, the god of the Canaanites. In ancient times, the followers of this god offered him sacrifices of meat, believing that by doing so, they would gain his favor and ensure the fertility of the land and prosperity in their harvests. From this practice comes the term carne a Baal, meat to Baal, which over time evolved into what we now know as Carnival. The Bible repeatedly warns about the worship of Baal and the terrible practices that accompanied it. In 2 Kings 10, it is narrated how King Jehu executed God's judgment against the followers of Baal in Israel, destroying their temples and putting an end to their priests. However, throughout history, this worship has taken various forms and has persisted in different cultures under other names and symbols. Baal-zebub, the Lord of the Flies. One of the names associated with Satan in the Bible is Baal-zebub, which in Hebrew means Lord of the Flies. This name appears in 2 Kings 1:2-3, when King Ahaziah, instead of seeking God's help, consults Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, provoking divine judgment upon himself. In the New Testament, this name evolved into the Greek Beelzebub, a term that Jesus mentions in Matthew 12:24-27, referring to him as the Prince of Demons. This connection between Baal and Satan is crucial because it demonstrates that the idolatry of Baal was not merely a cultural custom, but a form of rebellion against the true God. Throughout history, Satan has used various strategies to divert human worship toward himself, disguising his schemes as harmless traditions or cultural expressions. Have you reflected on the origins of Carnival? Perhaps you have never stopped to reflect on the true origins of Carnival. In many modern societies, this festival is seen as a simple cultural tradition, a time of joy and fun before Lent. It is promoted as an event that should be preserved and spread as part of humanity's heritage. However, when we analyze its roots, we discover that its original meaning is deeply tied to idolatry and the debauchery that God condemns. The Bible clearly warns us about the danger of following human traditions that lead us away from the truth. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. Colossians 2:8. Carnival is not just a social or cultural event. It is a festival with pagan origins that over the centuries has retained its essence of excess and disorder. Under the guise of fun, many people indulge in all sorts of practices that go against God's principles, justifying them with the excuse that it is an ancient custom. Rituals of the ancient pagans, masks, dances, and sacrifices. More than 5,000 years ago, ancient peoples performed ceremonies dedicated to their false gods. In these festivities, they gathered around enormous bonfires, painted their bodies in bright colors, and wore masks, believing that this would drive away evil spirits. These practices were part of their rituals to seek blessings upon their lands and harvests. The god Baal was a prominent deity in these rituals. He was considered the controller of the seasons, the provider of rain, and the guarantor of fertility. His followers performed frantic dances, processions, and ceremonies in his honor, wearing ornate garments in vibrant colors. However, one of the most sinister aspects of his worship was the practice of human sacrifices. Among the most horrifying rituals was the offering of children as sacrifices. Babies were placed in the arms of scorching metal statues or thrown into the fire while the priests and the crowd chanted and danced in a spiritual frenzy. This practice was known as meat for Baal, as it was believed that sacrificing these innocents appeased the deity and ensured the prosperity of the people. God made his judgment against these horrors clear in Jeremiah 19:5. They have built the high places of Baal to burn their children in the fire as offerings to Baal, something I did not command or mention, nor did it enter my mind. Human sacrifice, especially that of children, was seen as the ultimate act of devotion. It was believed that these offerings nourished and strengthened Baal, ensuring his favor upon the land and the people. However, the Bible shows us that these practices were abominations in the eyes of God, and that terrible judgment would come upon those who engaged in them. Elijah's confrontation with the prophets of Baal, a clear example of Baal's falsehood, is found in 1 Kings 18:26-29, when the prophet Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. In this episode, Baal's followers sacrificed a bull and placed it on an altar, crying out to their god from morning until evening. They shouted, danced, and even cut themselves with knives in a desperate attempt to gain his attention. However, there was no response, no fire from heaven, no sign from Baal. When it was Elijah's turn, he prayed to God, and in an instant, fire descended from heaven, completely consuming the sacrifice. This event demonstrated the absolute power of the true God and the falsehood of Baal. Carnival, the persistence of idolatry in the modern world. Despite biblical warnings, pagan festivals did not disappear. They were adapted, renamed, and adopted by different cultures with new meanings. Modern Carnival is an example of how a celebration with idolatrous roots remains alive today, disguised as fun and tradition. This festival is characterized by debauchery, immorality, and the exaltation of the flesh, exactly the opposite of what God commands in His Word. In many cities around the world, carnival parades feature extravagant costumes, masks, and behaviors that reflect the same practices of Baal's ancient followers. The question is, how long will we continue participating in traditions that God abhors? God calls us to separate ourselves from idolatry and from practices that draw us away from Him. In 2 Corinthians 6:17, we are exhorted, "Come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you." It is time to open our eyes, break free from deception, and reject human traditions that contradict the will of God. The carnival and its roots in ancient idolatry. Is it a harmless celebration or a pagan tradition? Since ancient times, many cultures have celebrated festivals related to seasonal changes, harvests, fertility, and the worship of pagan deities. In most of these celebrations, participants wore costumes, used masks, danced and performed sacrifices, believing they were honoring their gods or warding off evil spirits. Today, Carnival is considered a festivity of joy, color, and revelry, celebrated in many parts of the world. However, have you ever wondered about the true origins of Carnival and what this festival truly signifies from a spiritual perspective? The Bible repeatedly warns us about the danger of human traditions that lead us away from God. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. Colossians 2:8. Let us carefully examine the origins of Carnival and its connection to idolatrous practices condemned by God. 1. The hidden meaning of Carnival. Meat to Baal. The word carnival has a debated etymology, but one of its possible roots comes from the phrase carne a Baal, carne ab Baal, which literally means offering of meat to the god Baal. Baal was a Canaanite deity associated with fertility, agricultural prosperity, and weather. However, the worship of Baal involved abominable practices, including human sacrifices, especially of children. God severely condemned these rituals in the Bible. They have built the high places of Baal to burn their children in the fire as offerings to Baal, something I did not command or mention, nor did it enter my mind. Jeremiah 19:5. One of the names by which the Bible refers to Satan is Baal-zebub, Hebrew Baal-zebub, meaning Lord of the Flies. In Greek, this name evolved into Beelzebub, mentioned in the New Testament as the Prince of Demons. This means that those who participated in these festivals were not just worshipping Baal, but were unknowingly offering reverence to Satan. Is it mere coincidence that Carnival, a festival filled with chaos, sensuality, excess, and indulgence, has a direct connection to a pagan god condemned in the Bible? 2. Ancient pagan festivals related to Carnival. The Roman Saturnalia. One of the pagan celebrations most similar to modern Carnival was the Saturnalia, festivals in honor of Saturn, the god of agriculture and harvest. During these festivities, social norms were suspended and people indulged in excess without judgment. Slaves were temporarily freed and could behave as free people. Lavish banquets, parades, orgies, and acts of revelry were common. Masks and costumes were widespread, allowing participants to hide their identities while committing immoral acts. The Roman writer Lucian of Samosata mentioned that during Saturnalia, chaos and the inversion of order were worshipped, a concept that persists in Carnival today. The Greek Dionysian festivals. In ancient Greece, the Dionysian festivals honored Dionysus, the god of wine, pleasure, and madness. During these celebrations, processions featured grotesque costumes and masks. Sexual excesses, drunkenness, and all kinds of revelry were promoted. Fertility rituals were performed, including sacrifices and orgies in honor of Dionysus. Does this sound familiar? Today, in many countries, Carnival serves as an excuse for indulgence in alcohol, lust, and excess, just as in the pagan festivals of antiquity. 3. The influence of the Catholic Church, the Christianization of Carnival. With the fall of the Roman Empire, the Catholic Church became the dominant force in Europe. Instead of completely eliminating pagan festivals, it adapted them to Christianity. Thus, Carnival became linked to the observance of Holy Week. Ash Wednesday marks the beginning of Lent, a 40-day period of reflection and abstinence before Easter. For many, Carnival became a last moment of pleasure and indulgence before a time of penance. However, this adaptation did not change the pagan essence of Carnival. It remains a time in which moral and spiritual principles are cast aside in favor of indulgence. 4. How should a believer view Carnival? When we analyze Carnival in light of the Bible, we realize that it is not just a cultural celebration, but an event with deep spiritual and idolatrous roots. God warns us about the need to separate ourselves from worldly customs. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Romans 12:2. Carnival is not an innocent festival. At its core, it remains a celebration dedicated to indulgence, excess, and estrangement from God. If we truly seek to please God, we must question what the world presents as tradition and analyze it in light of God's word. 5. True prosperity comes from God. We do not need to worship idols or participate in pagan rituals to receive blessings. True prosperity and genuine joy come from God. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Deuteronomy 6:5. In God we find everything we need. We do not need the world's approval or its false celebrations to be happy. Conclusion: will you keep celebrating Carnival? Now that you know the truth about Carnival, the decision is in your hands. God calls us to live in holiness, set apart from traditions that draw us away from Him. Thank you for reading this analysis of the origins of Carnival. If you found this insightful and want to learn more about history, culture, and the truth behind many traditions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this message. May God bless you.